It's a great pleasure for me to moderate this session for the Concordia Annual Summit focusing on Ukraine. My guest today is Yuriy Vitrenko, CEO of Naftogaz Group, the country's state oil and gas conglomerate, and someone who has become one of the most vocal critics of the Gazprom-sponsored Nord Stream 2 pipeline. Yuriy knows Gazprom quite well, having negotiated Ukraine's current 5-year gas contract with them and winning a Stockholm arbitration court award of almost $5 billion against the Russian gas giant in 2018. Ukraine has been in the headlines over the past several weeks, with President Zelensky meeting Chancellor Merkel in Kyiv ahead of the 30th anniversary celebrations in August, and then with President Biden in Washington on September 1st. A key issue during both meetings with world leaders has been the construction of the Gazprom-sponsored Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which, according to news reports, has been technically completed and will carry Russian gas under the Baltic Sea directly to Germany. So I'm now going to address a few questions to Mr. Vitrenko, the first of which is, why is this issue so important to warrant the attention of two of the G7's main players on the North American and European continents?
Let me try to answer it within a historic context. Even during Soviet Union times, gas was a coercive tool used by Kremlin to pacify European criticism of Soviet regime and its policies. After the fall of the Soviet Union, Russia quickly regrouped and during the past 2 decades has become one of the largest security threats to transatlantic unity and to the European democratic project, which has brought peace to Europe continent for more than 50 years already. The contemporary tools used by Kremlin include disinformation, fake news, cyber attacks, weaponizing gas, and even hybrid warfare against my own country, Ukraine, and others who do not follow the Kremlin line. Therefore, I think it's appropriate that the Nord Stream pipeline is on the agenda of the world leaders because it's a significant economic and security threat for Ukraine, but not just for Ukraine. It increases the risk of a full-scale war between Ukraine and Russia, with consequences for the entire world, and definitely for Europe. And it's already perceived in many countries, especially in Eastern Europe, as a symbol of Western corruption. Obviously, it does not help the European Union or a soft power of the so-called free world. And it's not a distant threat. In fact, Gazprom is blackmailing Europe and weaponizing gas as we speak through low gas storage reserves and high energy prices. The truth is that for the past decade, we have been publicly told one thing by Gazprom, that Nord Stream 2 is a commercial project, despite the United States Congress and the European Parliament clearly saying that it's a political project that poses a security threat and danger to Europe. We were told by Gazprom that these pipelines were built to transport additional, I repeat, additional volumes to Europe on top of Ukraine pipeline. But now we see that Gazprom is decreasing approximately by 1.5 times in the past year alone volumes it ships through Ukraine to Europe. And we see a crisis emerging with low gas reserves in Europe and prices of gas rising to record levels, causing economic problems all over Europe, especially in some Eastern European countries and in Ukraine.
Why is Gazprom doing this now?
Probably Putin recognizes that it's a very crucial time in European energy politics and unique moment for him basically to demonstrate whether or not rule of law applies to the declared EU energy principles, which should extend to all market players who supply, trade, transport, and sell gas in the European market. There is a lot of talks in Europe about a Green Deal, probably you've heard about it many times. However, for that deal to work, we must ensure that the fair deal outlined in the European Gas Directive actually works. And what we mean is that unbundling, fair competition, third-party access to pipelines, independent regulation, and market pricing, all this works, basically. And this is what Gazprom is most afraid of. The Putin's regime mentality is, I would say, might makes right. And since they are one of the largest European gas powers, gas suppliers, they believe that they do not have to play by the same rules as in Europe. Instead, they're actively pressuring, for example, German government and regulator to quickly certify Nord Stream 2, despite it's not compliant with European rules. We see in our own monitoring that many of Gazprom proxies are actively now filling the media space with experts' comments and messages that high European gas prices can be lowered if Nord Stream 2 is quickly certified and becomes operational. They see upcoming, for example, German parliamentary elections that are really over the corner, and the prolonged negotiations over the new ruling coalition as some power vacuum that they can use to push for this incompliant Nord Stream 2 certification. And of course, again, needless to say, it cannot be allowed to happen.
That's excellent. To simplify it for a lot of people too, that basically Russia does not want to do what the law in Europe requires, and that is that if you own the pipeline, you cannot own the gas you're selling and putting through the pipeline. And they own both. They pretend they don't. So in the fact, and that's what they want to get around, and that, of course, it shouldn't be allowed. How do you see the process going forward from now on?
You're right, basically, and as I mentioned, this European Gas Directive is quite specific in principles and the rule of law. We insist that these rules apply fully to Gazprom and Nord Stream 2 pipeline, as Germany and the USA in their joint statement in this context, it should be compliant with the letter and the spirit of the law. There is lots of news coverage of the pipeline construction being complete. But to become operating, there is another issue called unbundling, as I mentioned, that Gazprom must go through under the European energy law to ensure this fair competition. Pipelines, as you said, the energy and the energy transport cannot be controlled by the same person or group that controls gas production or supply. And again, when it comes to the issue of certification, and according to German, their own procedures, the regulator has up to 4 months to certify Nord Stream 2 pipeline, and then there is certain involvement of the European Commission that is mandated by these relevant provisions, and they have up to at least 2 months to look at the certification before the final decision is made. Therefore, we're talking about a period of at least half a year, at least basically, for this certification procedures to be completed. And we do believe that, again, under the current circumstances, Nord Stream 2 cannot be certified. And in order to be certified, the Putin's regime should really change their approach to gas. It should become just an ordinary commodity, and they should stop using natural gas as a weapon. Only then one can prove that they follow the European rules. Again, there is a level playing field, there is a fair competition, and they really play by this common market rules.
What they're doing is they're strong-arming Europe and Germany before the winter heating season by making gas in short supply, and they're trying to get them to force through or abrogate their own requirements and regulations and laws. What in the world can be done to remedy the situation as it is now?
First of all, Europe should stay strong, and they should clearly send the signal that they have this rule of law. And again, there is no way they will show their weakness or softness when it comes to such fundamentals of the rule of law. We also believe that the US congressional sanctions is probably the strongest tool to ensure that Russians don't use gas as a weapon, and it used to be in the past. And they are now using gas as a weapon. That's why we believe that these congressional sanctions should be applied without any waivers to really stop this project from become operating when it's clearly not compliant with European rules, and when it's clearly is being used as a weapon against Ukraine and Europe. And also, just to finish, basically, we also, in our own experience, we had to follow these European rules in 2019 when we were successfully reforming, I would say, our gas sector. And when we were signing this new transit agreement, again, we went through this rather painful and costly exercise of unbundling. We ensured really very undiscriminated third-party access to all our pipelines. And we were, to some extent, even promised by our European colleagues that this new transit arrangement will allow us to see third parties entering Ukraine and transiting gas through Ukraine, for example, to Europe. But because of the Gazprom's action, because of them blocking access from the Russian territory to the Ukrainian gas transmission system, we actually cannot see it working. So that's why when we're talking about remedies, we should really press Russia and press Gazprom to unblock access to Ukrainian gas transmission system from the Russian territory, to let European companies decide when they want to get their gas. For example, many of them, they want to get gas on Ukrainian-Russian border. They should also allow independent Russian companies, independent from Gazprom, to export gas to Europe through Ukraine, and to allow exports from Central Asia. That would be the best remedy of the current crisis that we see in Europe with this high record prices, but also it's a precondition, it's a condition precedent to any basically certification of Nord Stream 2 and to anybody saying that Gazprom is ready to play by the rules. Let them show it first.
This is he's really got, Putin and the Kremlin really have Europe in an untenable situation. What do you think will open this up and block it? I mean, they're going to be fighting it all the way. And the other question would be, can Congress alone pass a new set of requirements to shut down that pipeline, or does Biden have to change his mind?
Both options are open. So first, we do believe that the new US administration will now see that Russia is using gas as a weapon, and they will follow their own joint statement with Germany, and they will impose these sanctions on, for example, Nord Stream again for using gas as a weapon. So now it's enough of proof that they're using it as a weapon. And then it's even logical for them to say, look, as soon as you stop using gas as a weapon, as soon as you allow third-party access to all the pipelines that connect Russia and Europe, as soon as there is a level playing field and you play by common rules, then we will waive our sanctions. So such waivers should come after they follow the rules, after they stop using gas as a weapon, not basically before or based on some promises that we cannot even hear from the Russian side.
This is a difficult question to ask you, and it can be a yes or no answer, but what if Russia just refuses to behave itself?
As it happened in the past, again, Russia is not a global economic power. Both the US and Europe are much more powerful in terms of their economic might, in terms of the strengths of their markets, in terms of even their energy security. So they can easily live without Russian gas, although Russia cannot live without money they get from oil exports or gas exports. From that perspective, the West should show its basically strengths, its power, its might, and they should show that countries like Russia will never be allowed to be above the law, because, as I said, it hurts the very fundamentals of the Western society, of the Western democracy, of the Western basically countries.
That's an interesting answer. Now let's turn to Ukraine. What is Ukraine's medium and long-term energy priorities in light of all of this?
First of all, since we have been talking about gas, it's probably makes sense to remind that gas is seen by many as a transitional fuel, since its carbon footprint is significantly lower than, for example, of coal. And natural gas can be necessary for peaks and for balancing in increasing energy consumption from renewable sources. But we should also remember that different gases can be produced from renewable sources, like biogas or green hydrogen. It's all about gas, although it's not natural gas. And for example, Naftogaz, the company that I lead, is predominantly a natural gas company. But our priority is to help Ukraine realize its potential to produce, transit, and store natural gas, but also gases from renewable sources. So in general, our goal is to make energy sector of Ukraine sustainable. It also includes affordability of energy for households, competitiveness of the industry, and security of supply. I would also add that Ukraine's goal, or for example, Naftogaz goal, let's be more specific, it's to reach climate neutrality by 2040. And we're working on our climate neutrality strategy, which we hope to present next year. But in general, I would say that Ukraine wants to be a good global citizen, and it means that we are serious about climate change and fighting it as other modern countries.
Do you want to talk about methane emissions?
Yes, although I would say that, for example, our infrastructure, gas infrastructure, is proven to be much more reliable than, for example, infrastructure in Russia. We have 7 times on average less incidents than, for example, in Russia. But at the same time, we do understand that we need to reduce methane emissions, and we should work and invest in the efficiency of our gas infrastructure. Again, starting from leaks and flaring, basically, and everything, because of course methane can be even more dangerous in terms of emissions than CO2.
And you're going to be looking at low carbon businesses as a key platform to growing Naftogaz?
Yes, as I mentioned, for example, Naftogaz identified green businesses as one of the key platforms for its future growth. The first key direction is low carbon, biofuels and gases, biogas, biomethane. We have some pilot green hydrogen projects. For example, we signed recently a memorandum with a leading German company about producing green ammonia from green hydrogen, because it's basically like the fastest time to market project in our portfolio. But in general, again, we are very serious, again, and as we speak, we're now working on this, I would say, green projects, be it biogases, green hydrogen, or just, for example, increasing the level of energy efficiency, generating power from renewable sources. It all helps reduce our carbon footprint, and to help our customers, that is also very important, to reduce their carbon footprint.
Ukraine is, I think a lot of people don't realize that Ukraine is one of the most technologically advanced countries in the world, with a brain power that is really pretty much unmatched, certainly even in Europe in terms of IT expertise and so on. Research and so on is something that Ukraine and Naftogaz could contribute. Will the research and the IT and the other technological advance help Ukraine meet its gas transmission targets without the help of international partners?
Yes, sure. Recently, we had a trip to California with the Ukrainian president to meet with IT businesses over there, and I was making again some speech over there, and I mentioned that, for example, I feel that in our industry we're also an IT company much more than a resource company, because in modern world technologies matter more than natural resources. And when we discuss new projects, again, especially green hydrogen, biogas, biomethane, energy efficiency, it's very much about IT. It's very much about smart use of energy and smart generation of energy, smart distribution of energy. So it's all about IT. And we already work with some of the Ukrainian IT companies to help us, to help Ukraine, to help the whole world basically become much smarter about the way we produce and use energy.
So it sounds like, you know, you certainly have your hands wrapped around your issues. On a scale of 1 to 10, how optimistic are you that the situation regarding the blackmailing by the Kremlin and Europe and energy supplies and Naftogaz going forward, how optimistic are you?
Again, I'm biased because I'm in the middle of the fight, but at the same time, I do believe that both the US and Europe will show that, again, the rule of law is a fundamental principle of the Western world, and it should prevail over blackmailing from the Russian side. I also believe that we can, as a country basically, and as a national company, we can deliver on our ambitious targets in terms of, for example, fighting climate change. But at the same time, I would mention one very important thing. So, for example, Ukraine has this ambitious target of meeting our green emission targets and reducing it by 65% in the nearest future. But at the same time, it's unlikely that it's possible without the help of the international partners, and again, without some kind of global coordination. Because, as I said, again, we are committed to meet the goals of the Paris Convention, for example, and align with the European even Green Deal, but we cannot do it alone. We currently, for example, estimate that we would need more than $100 billion to finance the green transition. And it's important to always remember that climate change is global, basically. So producing energy from renewable sources, reducing emissions, or capturing carbon in Ukraine is as important as in much richer, for example, Western European countries or in the US. And Ukraine has a huge potential for this. This is why it's very logical that we should get equal opportunity, for example, to sell energy from renewable sources to the EU market at the same price and with the same subsidies as producers from the EU. The same applies to selling, for example, carbon capture, storage, and utilization services.
Since its independence in 1991, and you're doing a fantastic job, and the country is, in light of the bully next door and all of the other difficulties. On behalf of everybody, I think I wish you well and continued good success.
Thank you very much for your help, and again, together we will win.